Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. It's interesting. We've been doing work in the Bay Area for decades and decades, and my ancestors have been here since the beginning of time. And we work with SURJ in the Bay, closer to the San Francisco Bay Area for many years now. And it really does take all of us in order for us to get the work done. And so thank you all for being open and working with Indigenous leadership across the Bay. I'm going to share my screen and do a presentation for you, and hopefully I have a timekeeper because I can tend to be a talking head.
Yep.
Okay, so I thought I'd talk about a little bit about decolonization and the rematriation of land. And today, because I haven't worked closely with the SURJ in Contra Costa County, and that is one of our territories, I thought I'd start out with a little bit of history for folks that may not know, and then go into the current work that we're doing today. There was 3 waves of colonization that happened in the Bay Area, and we don't talk about it. If you grew up in the Bay Area, you don't learn about it. And if you learn about it, it's very quickly, right? We talk about the mission period, the Rancho period, and the US occupation, the annihilation of Native California population, the creation of the first prison industrial complex, legal enslavement, environmental devastation, and the desecration of the sacred, legislation of colonial genders and sexuality, rape and sexual violence is normalized. And so these are kind of key themes, but they're a little heavy when we talk about it. And I know that when I often get asked to come and speak at groups, that the history that's spoken about is something that people never heard before. And sometimes it could be a heavy amount of information to get. And I invite you to breathe through it with me. This is a colonial process that happened, and when I talk about these things, I know it's heavy for folks that may have just be hearing it for the first time. And it's also a part of our historical trauma. So it's like ripping a Band-Aid off a wound every time I have to talk about it. So I'm inviting you to go through this journey with me this morning, okay? This is a map of the 21 missions that were set up in the state of California. They started at the bottom in San Diego and worked their way up to Solano. And that was the last one that was placed here. And during this population, I talked to young people. I said, well, how did Spain get this land, right? And most people think that Spain got the land because they came and they had wars. They fought with the native people. That's how young people think. But there was actually this guy, if you can imagine, around in the 1500s, coming down the coast of California. And as he was coming down the coast of California, he saw smoke. And the smoke what he saw was from intentional fire set by California Native people as part of taking care of the land and living in reciprocity with the land. Well, he saw this land, and without getting off his ship, he claimed it, or called dibs, which some people remember. If you call dibs on the last donut, that means that donut's yours. Well, he called dibs on the land for Spain and the crown, and then moved on, just found his way on down to San Diego, but never came back for about 200 years. Spain just left this land here that they called dibs on, right? And then they came back a few hundred years later when they were afraid that they were going to lose the land to the Russians, who were doing fur trade with Northern California natives. And so in order to hold the land that they had called dibs on, they decided to use this mission system that they had used on indigenous people in Mexico and Central and South America. It was a way of holding down land and imprisoning the native population. And there was this guy named Junipero Serra, who we'll talk about a little bit later, who was super happy to do this kind of work. Mexico and America had a war in 1848. In between that time, go back to the mission period. The mission period lasted for 99 years. and they enslaved the people, and they created the first prison industrial complex of California. So Native people were forced to actually build their missions or the places where they would be enslaved at, and then they couldn't leave. Language was taken, people died of starvation. The food, it was often talked about that the nutritional value of the food given in the missions were actually had less nutritional value than the prisoners in Auschwitz were given. And so people were actually worked to death. And so there was diseases that were brought here, syphilis, smallpox, typhoid, different kinds of stuff. And so people were not able to produce the children as fast, or they weren't able to live into adulthood. And so our population dwindled quite a bit. After the 99 years, the missions were secularized. Mexico had wanted its independence from Spain, and in so gave huge swaths of land to Mexican soldiers. And so where I live and my family grew up was given to the Peralta family. So a lot of the East Bay in the Bay Area was given to the Peralta family, the Bernals, the Moragas. They're names that we hear all the time but never think about. Vallejo. And so that lasted for a little time. So my ancestors went from being slaves at the missions to being slaves on these ranchos, and very little was written about the native slaves on the ranchos at the time. And then there was a war between Mexico and America. In 1848, Mexico and American War, and the land was stolen for a third time by the United States. And instead of slavery, it was now about mass exterminations. So we know the history of the United States and the United States government writing treaties and breaking those treaties all along, but they wrote treaties, these agreements with Native people. There was a treaty between Mexico and America, a Treaty of Guadalupe de Hidalgo, very famous treaty that gave this land to America. And in that treaty, it said that some of the land was supposed to go back to California Native peoples, but that treaty was broken. And the first laws in the state of California were extermination laws of Native people. And we don't learn about this in history, that these laws that were created, it was backed by the federal government money. California spent $1.4 million killing Native people, $5 a head and 25 cents an ear. It was about eradicating Native people so that they did not have to be a problem for folks coming. We hear about the gold rush in California. We uphold the 49ers. We love that period of people coming here looking for for gold. But the fact of the matter is that there wasn't gold for everybody to find. And the amount of men that came into this state was massive because they were looking for their fortune. But you could raise a family or make a living by killing off Native people. And so our ancestors went from slavery in the missions to slavery with the Mexicans to outright genocide in California, all consecutively. It never stopped. It was always ongoing. So my ancestors, and like many California Native people, survived in different ways. Some of us survived by pretending that we were Mexican, having had forced to learn Spanish and working on the ranchos. My ancestors directly were enslaved at or stayed in Pleasanton, California, near the where the fairgrounds are today, and in order to survive. Even if people survived during that period, there was an ongoing onslaught of trying to assimilate Native people in the in the coming years. And so not just California Native people, but Native people from across the country. And so boarding schools and Indian foster care was created. And boarding schools were really about the forced assimilation, taking children away from their parents and their tribal communities, stopping the language and ceremonies and song, really trying to beat the Indian out of the child in order to save them. And then we talk about Indian foster care. We think about foster care today as a way of helping children to that are need to, a nice and safe environment to be, or a place to be, to take care of when their parents aren't able to. Indian foster care was much different. And, children were taken away from their parents just because they were Indian. This happened to my mom. She was taken away from her parents when she was still in the hospital. It happened to my aunties as well. My auntie and uncle went to boarding school at Shellmound boarding school in Oregon, and that boarding still exists. Once they left boarding school, around 11 or 12 years old, my auntie went to live with a family in San Leandro, California, right, which is borders Oakland here. She tells this story a couple of years ago in her living room. My auntie's 84 years old, and she tells this story of I'm sitting in the living room, and my cousins, two of her daughters, and they had never heard this story before. And she begins to tell the story about, oh yes, we went to boarding school, and then we were taught really how to be maids. And so part of the foster care system was to ship Native kids to rich families' homes so that they could be domestic workers. And so my auntie was one of those. She went to San Leandro. She talked about how she was at this family's house, and she took care of their children, and she ironed and washed their clothes, and did all of those kinds of things at the age of 12. And she said this nice white family, they were so kind, they wanted to send her to school. And they tried to put her in school in the city of San Leandro. And the city of San Leandro said no, because she was too dark. So she could not go out of school. My auntie ended up marrying at the age of 14 and having 7 children and raising them with her husband, and worked as a waitress at the Acapulco restaurant in Alameda for many years. This is not that long ago, right? This is in our lifetimes that this happened. So this is a continued practice of trying to erase people. In 2015, here comes this guy, Junipero Serra again. Junipero Serra was the one who created 9 of the 21 missions that was created in the state of California. With this, he was a fanatic and was not about so much saving the Indian in real life, but saving the souls, and by any means necessary. And so it was because of these practices that he brought to our states, our villages, that our people began to perish in such a way that our languages were gone, that our village life, that foods were introduced that we began to die from. And then in 2015, the Catholic Church decided that they wanted to make this man a saint. And we fought against it. Not just California natives, but people from all, Native people from all over the world actually stood up to the Catholic Church and asked that this not happen, that he actually brought genocide. He was the one that brought the diseases. He was the one that enforced this way of life on us. And there's no way. You know, there's many people that liken Junipero Serra to Hitler. And, you know, growing up as a Catholic, I know that what we do is, when we have saints, is that we intervene, we ask for their intervention. We pray to saints in order for them to ask God to help us out, to provide miracles. But imagine praying to someone who actually created the destruction of your people, and what that would do to your soul. And so we stood up asking that this not occur. And the Catholic Church, of course, thinking that they still know what's best for Indigenous people, denied us that and made him a saint. And these are just some folks that got together in Southern California, in a Mission Dolores in San Francisco, standing up against this. And so this was a huge campaign that we did all over the place. People stood up. Other people from other faiths came and stood with us and prayed with us, and also apologized for the the things that Christianity did when it came to our lands. We've stood up together also with our Pacific Islander brothers and sisters around the injustices that are happening in their island homes, and standing up to what's happening with climate crisis in their places. And they are the ones that are actually feeling the repercussions now as their homelands are drowning or are being sunk in the ocean. As it's we don't see that all here yet, but we stand with them doing that kind of work. We also are working right now to save the West Berkeley Shellmound, the oldest village site and cemetery of my ancestors along the coast of California. We've been in this battle for almost 5 years now, trying to preserve and protect this site. This site is a part of our cosmology, a part of where we believe our first people were buried, and our ceremonies emerged around their burial in these shell mounds was because it lines up. You see, the coast of California used to actually come, the waters used to come closer than they are now. The 880 freeway is all on fill. If people didn't know that, that's not the original coastline. And so my ancestors always built our villages and our cemeteries where fresh water met salt water. Close to marshlands where we would use the tule to build houses and our boats, and to eat a lot of shellfish and bury our ancestors in these monuments that are older than the pyramids of Egypt. There were 425 of these shell mounds that used to ring the Bay Area. Virtually none of them exist above ground anymore because of development. Our ancestors have been used to pave the streets of many major cities in the Bay Area. And so what is left of them is our responsibility to try to save. So this old one that we talk about saving is actually on a 2.2 acre of land at 1900 4th Street. It is a parking lot. And what we see as a parking lot right now. Hundreds of people have come and prayed with us for the last 4 years, asking for protection. When this developer wanted to develop here, it was condominiums and box shopping. And we had people from all walks of life, including folks from SURJ Bay Area that came out, and they helped us to write letters, campaigns, to do social media campaigns, to hold up the zoning board meetings until 2 o'clock in the morning, to go to landmarks commissions until 2 a.m., making people over and over again, and really helping us work on all of the things. And so this is actually an MLK event that happened at the West Berkeley Shellmound, and we had help from folks from all over the place, had people that came and danced that were Korean drummers and people that were Mexica dancers. We had Tibetan chanters and Hawaiian chanters. So people from all walks of life come, including Christian, Jewish, and Muslim people, come and pray together with us in these places. When Mauna Kea, which is their Hawaiian people and the people in the Pacific's sacred mountain, is under threat of being destroyed, we opened up our sacred place in order to connect those sacred places together. And we had hundreds of people show up at this site, the West Berkeley Shellmound, to pray with our brothers and sisters from Mauna Kea. And you can see that there's other flags there. There are flags from all over the place that came, including an Irish flag, and I don't think I have this one inside of this picture. We've also had people that are Buddhists that have come and worked with us and sang. And so these are just some of our folks that have come and participated in the prayer circles that we've had at the West Berkeley Shellmound. Korean drummers, Jewish young people that did an evening event there and had prayer. And this is our chief Nenaway from the Amazon, who came and prayed with us as well. We do all of this work, but we also created the first, as I was introduced, the first urban Indigenous women-led land trust. It's important that we talk about this because Sogorea Te Land Trust was created because we talk about the 425 shell mounds, and many of our ancestors were put in roadways, but many of them still exist in boxes and racks at many of the universities and museums around the Bay Area. And as we've been doing this work around protecting and preserving the sacred sites and doing education about shell mounds in the Bay Area, we realized that we, as non-federally recognized people, we had nowhere to put these remains if they were given back to us. UC Berkeley holds over 9,000 of our ancestral remains and funerary objects. Imagine having a whole cemetery that you would have to create. And this is one university. There are multiple universities. Many of our universities and higher education places are actually built upon our village sites. UC Berkeley, Stanford, San Francisco State, Dominican, Mills College, DVC, are built upon village sites that have been here for thousands and thousands of years. And so really trying to figure that out. This is the first piece of land that was given back to our people in 250 years. And we're not talking about all of this. We're talking about, if you can see my arrow, it's just this piece here, right? Just here. Mostly where the circle is of these people. And this creek that's now culverted is the creek that my ancestors are named, or we're named after. We're the Lisjan people. It's the San Lorenzo Creek area is our people, but our tribe is actually made up of the 5 different nations brought into Mission San Jose as prisoners. So we are made up of Ohlone, Bay Miwok, Plains Miwok, Yokut, and Napian people. And so when this land was given to us, I thought our ancestors were always, they always have this fun way of playing with me. This is a half-mile walk from my house. So it's really easy for me to get to. It is along our traditional creek. Where you see this freeway above here is actually where the bay used to come. And so it would have been fresh water meeting salt water. And so this quite clearly could have been a village site of my ancestors. The Planting Justice Organization is a nonprofit organization that has an organic farm, an organic nursery, and they work with formerly incarcerated men and women, and they provide jobs. And one year, about 3 years ago, we were invited to come and sit with the young people that run that organization, Gavin and Jole. And we sat under this California walnut tree back here. And they had gone to Standing Rock, and Standing Rock moved them in such a way that they asked the elders on their way back what they should do. And the elders told them that they should work with the First Nation peoples on whose land they live on. And so they invited us to sit under this tree and offered us this 1/4 acre of land to do whatever we wanted with it. And Janella LaRose and I, who are the co-founders of this organization, agreed to do that. But we agreed to do it through working in reciprocity with them. They didn't know us very well, and we didn't know them. And so our idea was that we were going to share this land. Then we were going to put somebody on the land full time so that they could build that relationship that needed to happen. It's about building relationships, about living in reciprocity with each other. It's about working together to try to change the world. And so we did that, and we have a beautiful relationship with them. We now have a couple of other pieces of land. This land now has a place called Hameka, which means in our language, a place where we all gather together. It's a resiliency hub that has fresh water tanks. It has a container system that has medicinal uses. We're building out an outdoor kitchen, and it has the first arbor ceremonial ring that has been built in our territory in 250 years. Over the time of COVID, our folks that have been working with us at Sogorea Te Land Trust, our staff, have been doing mutual aid and radical redistribution. It's our responsibility as Indigenous people to ensure that we take care of folks on our lands as well. And so we want to be good hosts. During COVID, we realized that many of our elders, young parents with young children, those that were immunosuppressed, could not get fresh food. And so we teamed up together with a couple of local farms and began distributing food to those folks that were most in need. At the height of it, we were giving out 100 boxes of food a week. And we're supported by many groups and folks and individuals that were able to do that. And so we were blessed to be able to do that work. We work with people from all walks of life. And so we have young people and elders and children and coming and putting their hands in the ground. And rematriation, I think this is I want to leave, I think, with this, is rematriation, I mean to restore a living culture to its rightful place on Mother Earth, or to restore a people to a spiritual way of life, in sacred relationship with their ancestral lands, without external interference. As a concept, rematriation acknowledges that our ancestors lived in spiritual relationship with our lands for thousands of years, and that we have a sacred duty to maintain that relationship for the benefit of our future generations. The rematriation is really about how we change our way of thinking in this world. When Janella and I started this nonprofit, Sogorea Te Land Trust, as an urban Indigenous women-led land trust, it was really about looking at who has been in charge of the land and how does that correlate to what has happened to women's bodies. When we look at what has happened to the land and the wars that have happened on it, the taking of it, the buying and selling of it, the rape of it, that has all happened to us as well. I think that women have this way of coming back to bring balance into the world right now that we need. A way for us to sing and for our waters and our lands, a way that we are able to bring our men and our sons and into it. And I think somebody's having a good conversation somewhere. And this is just a picture of our young people, some of our young people from Stanford that have come and helped us to do the work on the land, the arbors in the background. And we hope to sing that arbor back into space with the community once COVID is over. Grow medicinal plants to help folks. And we invite you to come to the land and to be a part of doing that when the time is right.